My grandpa owns a funeral home. My grandma is a psychic medium. My dad is a forensic pathologist, and my mom is a mortician. And me? I'm a celebrity everyone loves to hate. During a reality show livestream, I dug up a murder weapon while planting a tree in the morning, and then I reeled in a dead body while fishing in the afternoon. The production crew changed the show's name overnight from A Simple Life to Crime Scene. On the first day of shooting, the crew had us plant trees. We drew lots to form teams. Thanks to some behind-the-scenes manipulation, I got paired with Ethan, while his on-screen love interest and rumored girlfriend, Sophie, ended up with Frank, the comedian. Just last week, the internet was buzzing with news that I tried to seduce Ethan, got rejected, and then wouldn't leave him alone. Now this. You have to admit, the production team knows what their audience wants to see. The effect was exactly what the director hoped for. The moment the teams were announced, the live chat exploded, completely covering the screen. Chloe's at it again, riding Ethan's coattails. Can't she stand on her own 2 feet? OMG no, get them away from each other. Chloe, have you no shame? I feel so bad for Sophie. Doesn't Chloe have any self-respect? Does she really have to be the other woman? Give me a break. He's the 2-timing cheater who tried to get fresh with me. When I shut him down, he got pissed and started slinging mud. If the show hadn't offered me an insane amount of money, you think I'd want to be here? And the real other woman is their precious, innocent Sophie. When we got to the designated tree planting area, I frowned, looking at the southwest corner. A faint, malevolent aura was seeping from that spot. I grabbed a shovel and walked straight toward it. Ethan rushed to follow me. He maintains a charming, gentlemanly persona for the public, so in front of the cameras, he was a completely different person from the creep who harassed me. I'll dig the hole, he said, all fake sincerity. You can just water the tree. I couldn't be bothered with him. I found the source of the bad vibes and drove the shovel into the ground. Seeing this, Ethan sighed helplessly and started digging his own hole about 6 feet away from me. I'm strong, and it didn't take long for me to dig a hole about 1.5 feet deep. Just then, Ethan sidled over, trying to get more screen time. Chloe, that's deep enough. You should probably make it wider now. The crew had just explained the planting process. I'm not an idiot, I remembered. But I wasn't here to plant a tree. So I kept my head down and continued digging. The malevolent aura was getting stronger, which meant I was about to find something. Ethan came right up to me. Chloe, it's really deep enough. Let's widen the hole together. I shoved the meddling drama queen out of my way. Can you just dig your own hole? Stop bothering me. If my previous actions had just made the audience dislike me, shoving Ethan made them despise me. The live chat instantly filled with vitriol. Who the hell does Chloe think she is? Ethan was being the bigger person and trying to help, and she pushes him away? I can't with her. Why doesn't Chloe just disappear? How does someone like her even get into show business? Did someone in Chloe's family die or something? She's had a sour look on her face since the show started. Who is she trying to piss off? The cameraman, ever the professional, zoomed in for a close-up of Ethan's shocked and hurt expression, then cut to a close-up of me, and finally, a close-up of the hole. The second the camera focused on the hole, there was a clank. The force that shot back up the shovel handle confirmed I'd hit something. I shoveled it out onto the ground. It was a blood-stained Swiss Army knife. What's that? Leo, a singer from another team, ran over to get a look. He was about to touch the knife. Don't touch it. I stopped him. It's got blood on it and was buried this deep. It's probably a murder weapon. No way. That's impossible. Leo trailed off, silenced by my serious expression. Haha, Chloe must be joking, Sophie said, walking over with a sweet smile. I gave her a deadpan look and pulled out a handkerchief to wrap up the knife. The aura on this knife was too strong. A healthy person touching it would just have a bout of bad luck, but someone with a weaker constitution might get seriously ill. I planned to neutralize the negative energy before handing it over to the police. Seriously, what a drama queen. If it's a murder weapon, why not call the police? Did she forget to pay her phone bill? LMAO, she digs up a random knife, calls it a murder weapon, and then shoves it in her pocket like some kind of beggar. Sophie is so kind, trying to smooth things over for that lunatic. She really is the sweetest, Most beautiful person in the entertainment industry. The director's eyes lit up as he watched the live chat. He knew he'd hired the right person. The ratings and buzz for this show were guaranteed. This little incident set our tree planting way behind schedule. Luckily, we caught up later and didn't come in last. Lunch was distributed based on our rankings. Ethan and I got one meat dish and one vegetable dish. Since this is your first meal here, it's on the house, the director announced. But for the rest of the shoot, you'll have to find your own food. At this, the guests started grumbling. What? Where are we supposed to get food? Are there any restaurants nearby? Maybe we could. We don't have a cent. How are we going to eat out? I saw some vegetables growing in a patch over there. And there are fishing rods in the storage shed. Ingredients shouldn't be a problem. We can probably trade with the locals for other things. Can any of you actually cook? The only thing I can make is hot water. A silence fell over the group. True, ingredients were one thing. We were surrounded by mountains and water. But if no one could cook, we were screwed. You can get by boiling some vegetables with salt, but you can't do that with fish. Just then, Sophie raised her hand. I know a little. Maybe I can cook for everyone. Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief and showered Sophie with praise. The live chat followed suit, praising her to the high heavens. Before lunch, I went to the bathroom to wash my hands. While I was there, I neutralized some on the knife and then tucked it away in my suitcase. I was gone for maybe 7 or 8 minutes, but when I came back, there was barely any food left. Sophie was sitting in my spot, her bowl piled high with food, a blissful smile on her face. When she saw me, a flicker of gloating crossed her eyes before she put on a nervous, flustered expression. Chloe, you're back? That's a weird question. How about you start by explaining why you're in my seat, eating my food? Sophie's team had come in last, so their meal was just plain oatmeal and pickles. Ethan stood up, shielding Sophie. Sorry, you were gone for so long. We thought you weren't happy with the food and weren't going to eat. I haven't touched my portion, you can have it. No. You need your energy for this afternoon. Chloe, I barely ate any of this. If you don't mind. Sophie's words died in her throat as I took the bowl and chopsticks from her. She looked genuinely stunned, probably not expecting me to actually take her leftovers. Of course I mind, I said. Then, as her expression turned even more shocked, I dumped the food into the dog's bowl. Oh, right, Buddy is the little mutt the production crew bought from a local. Sophie was furious, but with the cameras rolling, she held back, her eyes just turning red with unshed tears. Ethan shot me a condemning glare, then wrapped an arm around Sophie, comforting her quietly. Is Chloe insane? She wouldn't eat it, but she won't let Sophie eat it either? She fed it to a dog? Who is she trying to insult? Dogs can't eat human food. Doesn't she have any common sense? What a dropout. OMG, Effie is real. My ship is sailing. Sophie was so upset that Ethan eventually had to take her inside to calm down. I calmly sat down and ate Sophie's oatmeal. Out of the camera's view, Frank gave me a thumbs up and a wink. Looks like a lot of people in the industry knew about Ethan and Sophie. That afternoon, everyone grabbed their gear and headed to the lake. Out of all of us, only Mr. Wallace, a veteran actor in his 50s, actually knew how to fish. But fishing is more about luck than skill most of the time. And they say beginners always have the best luck. Unfortunately, things were worse than we expected. We all sat there for over 2 hours, and not a single person had caught a fish. Frank couldn't take it anymore. Director Quinn, are you sure there are even fish in this lake? Tell us the truth. Director Quinn was baffled too. They had dumped 2,000 pounds of fish from the market into the lake before shooting. It was impossible for 8 people to have such bad luck that not one of them could catch a single fish. It's moving. It's moving. Someone shouted excitedly. All eyes turned to Ethan. Knowing this was his chance to shine, Ethan stared intently at the water's surface, waiting a few seconds before yanking his rod up. A 3 or 4 pound carp broke the surface, and everyone cheered. Ethan did a good job of hiding his smugness, humbly saying that he learned from the best. Sophie took the bucket with the fish and headed back. Another half hour passed, and I suddenly felt a knot in my stomach. My heart started pounding. My gut told me something was about to happen. Just then my fishing rod bent sharply downwards. Frank, who was next to me, immediately whispered excitedly, "Chloe's got one too." But I knew it wasn't a fish. The line was being pulled down with a heavy, dead weight, with no sign of a struggle. I tried to lift the rod, but it wouldn't budge. Frank ran over to help. With both of us pulling, the thing on the hook slowly started to surface. It was red like a piece of clothing. "Frank, hold on tight," I said, letting go and wading into the lake. Seeing this, a few people gathered at the edge, yelling for me to come back. I swam toward the red cloth. The moment I touched it, my suspicion was confirmed. I hadn't caught a piece of clothing. I'd hooked a woman's body, dressed in red. Someone on the shore realized something was wrong. What is that? It's not he stammered. "It's probably just a prank by the crew, right? Maybe to scare us or for some hidden challenge." The audience was thinking the same thing. The crew members looked at each other, confused about this new prank. Only the director's face was ashen, because he hadn't planned this at all. The body was heavy. It took a lot of effort to half drag, half carry her to the shore. Frank wanted to help, but I told him no. When I pushed the hair away from the corpse's face, I was shocked to see it was Jenna. Even though the body was bloated, I'd never mistake her. Jenna Wallace, my rival, and the only daughter of the actor Mr. Wallace. She was also Ethan's secret, official girlfriend. The scene fell silent. No one said a word. Only the live chat, after a moment of stunned silence, started scrolling furiously. "Jenna Wallace? Is that Jenna? I didn't hear she was going to be on this show. I heard Jenna was filming a movie in B-City. Why would she be here on a reality show? It must be a lookalike. Isn't this supposed to be a cozy reality show? What's with this sudden twist? Am I the only one who thinks that's a real body?" To the person who said body, "Don't be ridiculous. This is obviously the crew giving Chloe more screen time. Otherwise, would she dare jump in the lake to pull out a body? Is this another one of her publicity stunts? Jenna?" Mr. Wallace pushed through the crowd and stumbled toward the body. "Is that my Jenna?" He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling, afraid to touch her. The director, finally snapping out of his shock, roared, "Cut the cameras. Stop the live stream. Shut it all down. Call the police." The crew scrambled to turn off the equipment. The moment the live stream was cut, the audience finally realized this wasn't a script. Someone had really died. And it was the famous actress Jenna Wallace. But half a minute later, the live stream came back on. The camera was pointed directly at Jenna's body, the high-definition lens capturing her gruesome state in horrifying detail. At that moment, everyone was so focused on the body that no one noticed. Mr. Wallace, overcome with grief, fainted and was carried aside by the crew. There were no weights tied to the body. Given the level of bloating, she should have floated to the surface long ago. My heart sank. The fact that I was the one to find Jenna's body was no coincidence. She wanted me to. And by she, I mean Jenna herself. On a hot day like this, wearing long jeans was understandable. But Jenna would never pair them with a plain, long-sleeved, high-collared shirt, especially not with the top button fastened. Also, the Swiss Army knife I'd dug up had a malevolent aura, but the blade was too short and the tip wasn't designed for stabbing. It couldn't kill someone unless you slit their throat. The visible part of Jenna's neck had no wounds, and her shirt wasn't torn. "Chloe, what are you doing? Jenna's already dead. Are you going to disturb her even now?" Ethan rushed forward, grabbing the hand I was about to use to examine the body further. I stood up and studied Ethan's expression carefully. Jenna and Ethan's relationship was a well-kept secret. If I didn't have the ability to see and communicate with ghosts, I probably wouldn't have known about it either. When Ethan got with Jenna, he was just an extra, while Jenna, a second-generation star, was already a leading lady in major productions. To be blunt, the only reason Ethan, with his mediocre acting skills, got famous was because of Jenna's money and connections. I had mocked Jenna to her face many times for her terrible taste in men, and even hinted that Ethan was cheating on her. But Jenna was hopelessly in love. Not only did she refuse to break up with him, but she was even considering quitting her career to marry him. If you had to pick a suspect for Jenna's murder, Ethan, now successful, no longer needing her support, and having an affair with Sophie, was the prime suspect. When was the last time you contacted Jenna? I asked, my eyes fixed on him. Ethan frowned, the grief on his face looking genuine. What do you mean? Are you accusing me? Yes, I am. Because with Jenna dead, you're the one who benefits the most. And what about you? You and Jenna were always rivals. You were both competing for the lead role in director Guan's new film, The Sect. Don't you have a motive? His words made everyone else look at me with suspicion. As if remembering something, Ethan added, that Swiss Army knife you dug up this morning. You said it was a murder weapon, right? How did you know? I'll explain that to the police when they get here. You don't need to worry about it. Right back at you. My exchange with Ethan sent shockwaves through the internet. What's going on? Is this real? Is Jenna Wallace really dead? Holy crap. Chloe said Ethan benefits the most from Jenna's death. What does that mean? My brain just short-circuited. Are Ethan and Jenna a couple? I saw rumors about that online but thought it was fake. Could it be true? Don't get it twisted, people. Ethan's girlfriend is Sophie. Remember how he was holding and comforting her at lunch? Ethan has a point. Why is Chloe interrogating him? She's a suspect too. Someone is dead, and you guys are still fighting. This is messed up. Ethan biggest beneficiary. Jenna Wallace dead. Chloe suspect. Various hashtags started trending. After my standoff with Ethan, the scene fell quiet. Most people just waited silently for the police to arrive. The production team huddled together, discussing their options in hushed, frantic tones. But an hour passed, then 2, then 3. The police never came. A crew member tried calling 911 again, only to find there was no cell service. Not only that, the internet was down too. This sudden, bizarre turn of events made everyone except me feel a growing unease. Director, it's getting dark. What should we do? The assistant director asked nervously. The director gritted his teeth. Let's head back for now. We'll wait for the police to get here. As the crew packed up, they finally noticed something else was wrong. The live stream is still on. The shout startled everyone. The group, which had just started to calm down, broke out in a fresh wave of goosebumps. They had clearly turned off the equipment, and the internet was down. How could the stream still be running? They spent the next half hour trying every trick in the book, but they couldn't shut it down. One camera, its battery completely dead, was still operating. That made it impossible for anyone to pretend this was normal. The ones with weaker nerves were already breaking down and crying. Staying here won't solve anything. Let's go back, the director said, wiping his face wearily. The group walked back in silence. Mr. Wallace struggled to carry Jenna's body on his back. Everyone kept their distance, and no one offered to help. When they reached the house, Mr. Wallace didn't take the body into a room, but carried it to the storage shed. All these strange occurrences started after I brought Jenna's body ashore. Anyone with a brain knew what was going on. Sophie heard the commotion and came out of the kitchen, a cheerful smile on her face that was completely out of place. What took you guys so long? I made the fish a while ago. It tastes pretty good. You should have some to tide you over. Then she looked around, confused. Where's the fish? You guys didn't catch any more? Fish. The thought that the fish came from the same lake as a dead body made several people gag. Even though they were starving, they had no appetite. What's wrong with you guys? Did you eat something bad? Sophie asked with concern. A crew member pulled her aside to explain. If Ethan was the number 1 suspect, Sophie had to be number 2. I watched her, not missing a single flicker of emotion on her face. Sophie's expression went from confusion to surprise and a flash of joy, which she quickly replaced with sadness, and finally, it all melted into disgust. She ran to the side and started throwing up. For real. The smell of partially digested food filled the air. Sophie retched for a long time, until she was just spitting up bile. As the cook, she would have at least tasted it. If Sophie knew Jenna had died in that lake, she wouldn't have eaten fish caught from it. The suspicion on Sophie dropped a couple of notches. Even though the live stream was still on, no one was thinking about the show anymore. The director smoked a whole pack of cigarettes before making a decision. He changed the original show title, A Simple Life, to Crime Scene. That way, when things returned to normal, they might be able to spin it somehow. Stop filming? That idea went out the window the moment they realized the cameras couldn't be turned off. After all, no one wanted to risk going against Jenna's will. Dinner was a makeshift affair. Of course, no one touched the fish soup Sophie had made. It was thrown out, pot and all. Since Sophie and I were the only female guests, she graciously offered to sleep next to me that night. I didn't refuse. While Sophie tossed and turned like a pancake on a griddle, I closed my eyes and was out in seconds. At 12 a.m., the time of day when the positive energy is at its weakest and the negative energy is at its strongest, I opened my eyes. Sophie was gone. She was not the type to be brave enough to go out alone at night after what had happened. I put on my shoes and went to find her. Even though it was only September, a shiver ran down my spine the moment I stepped outside. A thin fog had rolled in, a damp cold that seeped into my bones. The cameras set up everywhere glowed with red lights, like eyes spying on us in the dark. Sophie was standing about 10 or 15 feet from the door, her back to me. She was barefoot. She turned to look at me, and her eye sockets were completely white. Then she turned back and walked forward on her tiptoes. The number of viewers watching the live stream at this hour was much lower than during the day. Something's wrong with Sophie. Where is she going? It's so dark, can't the crew turn on a light? I've got goosebumps all over. I can't watch anymore, I'm out. The already small audience shrank even more. Sophie was possessed by Jenna. I used my phone as a flashlight, following her from a safe distance. She walked to Buddy's doghouse. Buddy was cowering in the corner, tail between his legs, trembling like a leaf. He looked up at Jenna and whimpered, tears streaming down his face. I smelled a foul odor. Buddy had peed himself in terror. Jenna didn't get any closer. She just stood there, ramrod straight, and then 2 lines of bloody tears streamed down her face. Ghosts only cry blood when their emotions are incredibly intense. Is there a clue about your death here? I asked. Jenna shook her head slightly. Then do you remember what happened before you died? Who was the killer? This time, Jenna was silent for a moment before pointing at Buddy. I was confused. Surely Buddy hadn't killed her? Before I could figure it out, Jenna started walking back the way she came. She stopped at the door to the storage shed and stood there for a long time. Inside was her body and her father. Mr. Wallace never remarried after his wife died young. He gave up most of his work to focus on raising his daughter. When his daughter wanted to get into show business, Mr. Wallace used his years of connections to pave the way for her. As for Jenna's relationship with Ethan, Mr. Wallace had been strongly against it from the start. Jenna had pretended to break up with Ethan, but she never really ended it. To this day, I still don't understand what kind of magic Ethan possessed to make the proud Jenna so devoted to him. Who's out there? Mr. Wallace's sharp voice came from inside. Sophie's body went limp, and I stepped forward to catch her. Jenna was gone. Mr. Wallace opened the door, frowning. It's not safe at night. What are you two doing out here? Sophie was sleepwalking, I said, not mentioning the possession. Mr. Wallace glanced at the barefoot Sophie in my arms. Let me help you carry her back. I hoisted Sophie up in a princess carry. Thanks, Mr. Wallace, but don't worry about it. I've got her. As an actress, Sophie didn't weigh much. It was easy for me, a grown woman, to carry her. Mr. Wallace didn't say anything else and went back inside. The next morning, a scream woke everyone up. Sophie's assistant, Wendy, was dead. Given all the weirdness, everyone's first thought was that the ghost was claiming another victim. But a quick check of the body told me Wendy's death was man-made. Her face was contorted in a grimace, her skin and lips had a purplish tint, and her earlobes were cherry red, classic signs of cyanide poisoning. Was someone avenging Jenna? Or just using the chaos to settle a personal score? I had no way of knowing. The atmosphere grew even more tense, but after all this time, the police still hadn't arrived. The director had no choice but to send 2 crew members to drive to the nearest town to report the crime. 2 hours later, the car returned. The crew members got out, their faces pale. The fog is too thick. We couldn't see the road. We drove for a long time and ended up right back here. It was like we were bewitched. This was bad. We couldn't contact the outside world, and we couldn't leave. It was very likely that no one from the outside could get in either. We were completely trapped, at the mercy of a vengeful ghost. No. There was still one way to contact the outside world. The live stream. Survival trumps everything. Leo threw caution to the wind and ran in front of a camera. Our current location is City, West Province. If anyone nearby is watching, please call the police for us. He repeated the same message 3 times. Leo looked at the live chat and explained this isn't a joke or a prank. We really need help. We're trapped here. Please, someone help us. A moment later, Leo shouted with excitement, we got through. A viewer helped us call the police. Everyone relaxed a little at the news. Except for one person, whose expression remained grim. Ethan. I didn't tell anyone that Wendy was murdered. First, because they might not believe me, and second, because it could lead to paranoia and infighting. This was not the time to test human nature. We can't just sit around and wait. There must be a reason we're trapped here, Director Quinn, the de facto leader, said slowly. I think we all have our suspicions. Let's just put everything out in the open today. The police might not even be able to get us out of this situation. We have to save ourselves. His words rallied the group. Director Quinn, tell us what to do. How do we save ourselves? Yeah, give us a plan and we'll follow it. Quinn took a moment to think. This all started with Jenna. I suspect her killer is among us. She trapped us here to get her revenge. Instantly, all eyes turned to Sophie. It was simple logic. The first person to die was her assistant. In a classic ghost revenge story, Sophie had to be involved. Sophie hid in Ethan's arms, only a sliver of her face visible. It wasn't me. She cried pitifully. I didn't hurt Jenna. All right, there's no evidence yet. Let's not jump to conclusions about Sophie, Quinn said. But even as he said it, his gaze was just as suspicious as everyone else's. We're all in the same business. If anyone knows anything, now's the time to speak up. Quinn lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and exhaled a cloud of smoke. His expression was hard to read behind the haze. At this point, for the sake of everyone's survival, I hope we can all be honest. No more secrets. The number of viewers on the live stream was skyrocketing, with many tuning in for the drama. Quinn glanced at the camera. All right, here's the plan. I'll give you all 15 minutes to go to your rooms and disguise yourselves. We'll meet back here in 15 minutes and take turns speaking. I had to admit, the old fox was clever. The disguises wouldn't fool anyone here, but they would significantly reduce the chances of getting mobbed by fans online for what was about to be said. I heard Jenna was in a really bad state during her last film shoot. She was throwing tantrums, which was very unlike her. She probably had a boyfriend. I heard he's a big-name actor too. I bet it's Ethan. 2 weeks ago, when Ethan was filming a show, Jenna stormed into his dressing room. She seemed really agitated. They must have had a fight. Even though Chloe and Jenna were rivals, they seemed okay in private. They never really tore each other down. But Sophie, on the other hand, I heard she would make snide remarks every time she saw Jenna. I always thought it was weird. Sophie is a B-list actress at best. How did she dare talk to Jenna like that? And Jenna always just took it. A friend of mine saw it happen just last week. The discussion went on for nearly 2 hours. A lot of it was repetitive, but a few key pieces of information emerged. The main question was what had happened to Jenna to cause such a drastic change in her behavior. Was it because she found out about Sophie and Ethan? But the timeline didn't seem to add up. I noticed Mr. Wallace's face was paler than ever. He stared at Ethan, his jaw tight. I thought he was angry that his daughter was still involved with a scumbag like Ethan, but then Ethan glanced quickly in Mr. Wallace's direction. There was no guilt in his eyes, only a calm, mutual understanding. Then he stood up and, with a look of shame, confessed, Jenna and I were in a relationship. I cheated on her, and that's why she was so upset during that time. You're lying. We were never together. It was just a publicity stunt. Sophie frantically explained. Sophie, this isn't the time to lie to everyone. I told you from the beginning I had a girlfriend. You said you didn't mind. Shut up. You're lying. I didn't know. With Wendy dead and Ethan's testimony, Sophie's denial sounded weak and unconvincing. Almost everyone now suspected Sophie and Ethan. Director Quinn suddenly spoke up. Chloe, didn't you dig up a Swiss Army knife? I held up the plastic evidence bag containing the Swiss Army knife for everyone to see. I showed it to each person, but no one had ever seen it before. Disappointment washed over their faces. Someone muttered, "What are the odds?" But I was sure this knife was connected to Jenna's death. We were back at square one. All we could do was eat lunch and try to think of another plan. Woof. Buddy wagged his tail happily, trotting over to the table to beg for food. Remembering Jenna's hint, I picked Buddy up and examined him closely. He was about 3 months old and had a collar around his neck. It was just a plain collar, nothing special. I got up and walked over to Buddy's doghouse. I moved the soft cushion aside, revealing the dirt underneath. After pressing down on the ground, I started digging with my bare hands. The soil was loose, and it didn't take long for me to find something. Amidst a pile of trash was a diamond bracelet, completely out of place. It was ice cold to the touch, making me shiver. I had seen Jenna wear this bracelet many times. Upon closer inspection, I realized it wasn't just a simple bracelet. The back of the main diamond was embedded with a micro-tracker. It seemed things were even more complicated than I thought. I found Mr. Wallace eating alone by the storage shed door. I chose my words carefully. "Mr. Wallace, would you let me examine your daughter's body? It's a family thing. I know a bit about this." Mr. Wallace's expression was incredibly complex. "Chloe, can't you just let Jenna rest in peace?" Ethan suddenly appeared, blocking my way. I ignored Ethan and turned to wait for Mr. Wallace's response. Jenna said. Mr. Wallace put down his bowl. "That you were special." I froze, not understanding what special meant or why he was telling me this now. "Can you see her? Is she here right now?" My scalp tingled. I never thought Jenna knew I could see ghosts. After a moment of hesitation, I answered honestly, "She is here." Ethan flinched. Mr. Wallace shot up, pacing back and forth, muttering, I knew it." Then he asked eagerly, "Can you let me see her, just for a moment? Let me say a few words?" I shook my head. Seeing his gray hair and his shoulders slump, I felt a pang of pity. "If you have a message, I can pass it along to her when I see her." Mr. Wallace's eyes lit up, then slowly dimmed. After a long silence, he spoke in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry. Please tell her I'm sorry." I nodded, then held out the bracelet. "I found this nearby. It must be your daughter's, right?" Mr. Wallace instinctively glanced at Ethan. Ethan stared at the bracelet, his eyes bloodshot. He took it, studying it tenderly. At that moment, I was certain. Ethan loved Jenna. He loved her very, very much. "I'm sorry. I can't let you perform an autopsy. I can't," Mr. Wallace said with a sigh, turning to go back into the shed. It seemed my theory was correct. I was just missing one more piece to connect all the dots. "Jenna specifically led me to that bracelet," I said. Before either of them could react, I walked away. I found Sophie hiding in the crowd, looking terrified, and pulled her into a room. "Sophie, you should just tell the truth," I said, mixing fact with fiction. "You noticed something was wrong when you woke up this morning, didn't you? The truth is, you almost died last night." After a bit more bluffing, Sophie grew even more terrified. But she was still stubborn. "It really wasn't me. I didn't hurt Jenna. Your assistant died yesterday. Who do you think is next tonight?" I said in a low, eerie voice. The blood drained from Sophie's face. After a long pause, she finally said, her lips trembling, "I really didn't hurt her. I just accidentally found something out." At this, Sophie looked around, making sure there were no cameras in the room, before lowering her voice. "A few years ago, Jenna was drugged and assaulted. They filmed it. The guys tried to blackmail her with the video, but Ethan's powerful backer helped shut it down." I was stunned. A mix of emotions washed over me, and I didn't know what to feel. At the same time, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I really didn't hurt Jenna. I just used that to blackmail Ethan into a fake relationship with me. You know how famous he is. I didn't have any other options back then. I didn't listen to the rest. Whatever Sophie's reasons were, she was still in the wrong. And there was a huge hole in her story. Her assistant, Wendy. If Sophie was as innocent as she claimed, Wendy wouldn't be dead. I also didn't believe that just knowing about the video was enough to blackmail Ethan. "There's a signal." A voice outside shouted, filled with excitement and relief. I pulled out my phone and saw the 5G icon in the corner. I sighed. Across from me, Sophie's face was a mask of regret. She immediately frowned and threatened, "I'll say it again, I didn't hurt Jenna. If you dare repeat what I said, you're finished." Then she rubbed her eyes until they were red and walked out, maintaining her pitiful, wronged persona. Less than 10 minutes later, 4 or 5 police cars arrived. "Thanks for all your help, everyone. We've finally linked up with the police." Leo waved at the camera, announcing their safety. "So glad you're safe. Hugs to my dear Leo. You must have been so scared." "Titi, now that the police are here, they should be able to find the killer, right? I hope they bring the bad guys to justice. I think the killers are Ethan and Sophie. Let the cheater and the homewrecker rot in jail." Do you guys think ghosts are real? Was this all a shameless stunt by the show? Or was it a real supernatural event? About 20 people poured out of the police cars. One of them, a man in his early 20s, stood out. He had a refined, otherworldly handsome face, and he was wearing a Taoist robe, his hair tied up in a bun and held with a wooden pin. My gaze lingered on him for just a second, but he sharply looked over at me. My sixth sense told me he was the reason the police were able to find us. Before the police could even start their investigation, Ethan stepped forward and confessed to poisoning Wendy. The confession stunned everyone. Luckily, the live stream had finally been shut down, otherwise, it would have caused another massive uproar. I gave the Swiss Army knife to the police. After much consideration, I decided not to share my theories about the two cases. The dead are gone, but some things will forever haunt the living. Having seen so much human selfishness and indifference, why should I shatter this rare, beautiful thing? A few days later, I heard the results of the police investigation from a gossipy teenage ghost. The autopsy confirmed Jenna had been raped and murdered. She had over 20 knife wounds of varying depths. And the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. Ethan claimed he couldn't get in touch with Jenna. He used the tracker in her bracelet to find her body buried in a forest on the north side of the city. He didn't want his girlfriend's reputation to be ruined after her death, so he cleaned the body and changed her clothes. As for why the body ended up in the lake at the A Simple Life filming location, Ethan's explanation was that he had a suspect in mind, but the person was too powerful. His only option was to use the media to blow the story up, forcing the police to bring the real killer to justice. Ethan gave them 4 names. Luke, a famous singer known for his loving husband persona Carl, a top-tier agent director, an internationally renowned director, a wealthy local businessman in B City. Due to the intense public scrutiny and the high-profile nature of the suspects, the police were swamped. A week after Ethan's arrest, there was no progress in Jenna's case. On the 8th day, a bloody crime shocked the nation. The mutilated bodies of Luke, Carl, director, were found in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. Mr. Wallace turned himself in. When the police arrested him, he was smiling calmly. During the interrogation, Mr. Wallace confessed that he had also killed Wendy, and that Ethan was just taking the fall for him. Sophie's popularity plummeted. The internet was filled with calls to boycott her. Her career was in shambles, and her agency had all but given up on her. According to the grapevine, Sophie's mental health took a nosedive. She became paranoid, constantly saying someone was out to get her, and eventually became a recluse, too afraid to leave her house. The verdicts for Mr. Wallace and Ethan came out. Mr. Wallace was found guilty of intentional homicide with aggravating circumstances and was sentenced to death. Ethan, for covering up the crime and enabling the 4 murders, was charged as an accomplice and sentenced to 7 years in prison. I went to visit both of them in prison. Mr. Wallace refused my visit, but Ethan agreed to see me. I almost didn't recognize him. In just a few short weeks, Ethan had become a different person. He was unshaven, his cheeks were hollow, and his eyes were dull and lifeless. After we sat down, the first thing he did was apologize to me. When I realized what he was talking about, I laughed. "You were trying to tarnish my reputation so your girlfriend could get the role in the sect, weren't you?" Ethan nodded, then apologized again in a low voice. Thinking about him and Jenna, and seeing his current state, completely devoid of the will to live, I leaned in and whispered, "She hasn't been reincarnated yet. She's living in that bracelet now. Ethan's eyes slowly lit up. Really? He asked, almost afraid to believe it. I nodded with absolute certainty. Behave yourself in here. Try to get your sentence reduced. When you get out, you can take her to see the world. A gentle smile spread across Ethan's face, his eyes distant, filled with a beautiful dream. Okay, he said. When I left the prison, a crowd of reporters was already waiting for me. The reality show livestream had cleared my name of many false accusations, but a lot of people were still hung up on my behavior during the ordeal, saying I was just grandstanding and didn't provide any useful information in the end. I put on my sunglasses as the cameras and microphones swarmed me and slipped into the van. The car shook off the reporters and drove away from the prison. Did Mr. Wallace really kill Wendy? What did Sophie really do? And why did they let her go? How did a man in his 50s manage to kill 4 men in an abandoned building while they were under police investigation? These secrets would remain buried forever in the hearts of those who knew. The end.